Alright, today we're looking at Mario Kart World. This is going to be a relatively quick review on the game because a lot of people have already reviewed the game, but I do want to get my thoughts out since I got Switch 2 pretty close to launch, and obviously I picked up World here. So, Mario Kart World, as we go about, what is it? Mario Kart World is a kart racing game in the style of other kart racing games like Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing and all that. You know what Mario Kart is. It's this time a 24-player kart racer where you go through various courses and they try to be the number one. For unique mechanics, there are quite a bit. First off, it is, I believe, one of the only racers that supports 24 racers that are actually all players versus the standard 12 racing. You can do various tricks like rail grinding, as well as ground hopping to avoid shells and stuff, and then you can go from a ground hop to a rail grind to a wall and go on the wall, as well as do other things to allow you to gain speed and do a bunch of shortcuts. Another unique mechanic is the ability to race to the next track. So instead of just having four completely separate tracks, if you go one connected to the other, you race from the end of one to the start of another, and that counts as a lap. That is pretty interesting from just a design perspective, as well as getting you into the next race and getting you some more options. Other things that are pretty unique is the knockout mode, which is similar to a battle royale where you are trying to be in the top spot, and every checkpoint or so, the bottom four, I believe, are knocked out. That is the knockout mode, which is pretty unique compared to other kart racers, as well as other games like Forza that don't tend to have extensive modes like knockout mode. The unique thing is the free roam mode, similar to something like Forza, although definitely not without its problems. This is a mode where you can go into the environment here and just roam around, find switches and challenges and things and do them and just kind of enjoy with other people if you want the open world and freedom. It is, of course, similar to other games, including Forza has a battle mode with things like balloon battle and coin battle and time trials and all those things. But overall, in terms of unique mechanics, I would say the 24 racers, the tricks you can do, the racing to the next track, and the knockout mode, and then the free roam are the unique elements there. Do I recommend this game? And this is going to be tough. So I put this at the start because I kind of get rid of all the other biases that I would have from anything that comes after when I talk about, pricing and game loop and pros and cons and things. So overall, I would recommend Mario Kart World, especially if you haven't picked up a Mario Kart game in a very long time, or if you have and haven't played a ton of like 8 Deluxe. However, I think if you have played a lot of 8 Deluxe, Mario Kart World is not going to be very striking or very evocative for a game, especially when you have to buy a whole new system because of it. So I definitely would recommend the game if, like me, you have played a little bit of Mario Kart 8 and played a little bit of 7 and stuff. This does feel like a big step up in terms of a lot of things and a lot of features and a lot of expressiveness of the game itself. But I would say if you've played a lot of 8 Deluxe, World isn't really going to like stun you. It's not going to be like, oh my god, the whole new thing, it's crazy. Like, no, it's a pretty iterative update. No matter, depending on what people say, it might be, different or not. But to me, it's a pretty iterative update on 8 Deluxe. So if you've played a lot of that game, you may not want to pick up World immediately. So what's it on? Mario Kart 8 World, is only on the Switch 2. It's a Switch 2 launch title, as well as being exclusive to the Switch 2. So you will need a brand new Switch 2 to play this game. That's pretty simple there. How long is it? It's a multiplayer focused game. So in this case, it doesn't really matter how long it is, but I would say a story mode is effectively going through all the Grand Prix Cups, as well as the one you unlock at the end. And maybe unlocking mirror mode if that is something you want to do. And to me, that took a little bit, 5 or 6 hours, as well as doing some of the knockout tour and time trials and stuff, right? So if you're kind of like looking for an estimate, you can bang it out in 6 hours, but this is a multiplayer focused game. You're going to be racing online, and so it's effectively infinite. But I don't like to say it's infinite because I like to say, okay, what are you actually going to get out of it? And to me, and I think a lot of people, you're going to do all the Grand Prix, you're going to do some knockout. You might do some battles, and then you'll hop into online, do a couple hours of online. So like I'm trying to think, I think my 8 Deluxe time was like 40 hours or so. I think I did that, and obviously bought the booster course pass for that game, and so added a bunch of more courses. But my primary form of playing that game was with friends, as well as my sister, and we just like play that game and play it locally. I go online a couple times, but pretty much that was it. And so I got about 45 hours out of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So I would say if you're really into these games, obviously it can be a lot, but for me, and as I think other people, your actual play time of this game is probably going to be in like the 40-hour mark. Okay, pricing. Oh boy. So, Mario Kart World is a bundled option with the Switch 2, and you can get that for an extra $50. The system itself is $450. You can get it with the Mario Kart bundle for $500. Now, that is a limited time bundle, meaning it will go away, I believe, January 1st, and I assume then they'll have a different bundle that they'll offer, but they will no longer offer the current Mario Kart World bundle. The reason I mentioned in the bundle price first is that if you want to buy it after the bundle goes away, or if you want a physical version of the game, or if you just want another copy, it's $80. And knowing Nintendo, it may go down to like 70 or 60, but considering their 30% off thing, 30% off of 80 is still like 60, $58 or whatever. So not likely. So let's just say pricing is going to be 80. If you get it in the bundle, it's 50, and it will probably go on sale for 30% off. Now, obviously, this is also dependent on like regional currencies and stuff. These are all U.S. prices, so obviously, from what I've seen, it's like the European physical is like more expensive or something. So just be aware of that. But in the U.S. at least, it's 80 for physical, 50 for bundle. Is it worth the price? Which is the next category. This is a really tough one for me personally, as someone that's not a huge Mario Kart fan and doesn't really crave Mario Kart. I think $50 is worth it, which is what I got in the bundle. I think 60 is worth it. I might think 70 is worth it if you are going to play this game for a long time and repeat playthroughs of the online stuff. But 80 is absolutely not worth it. So I would definitely say don't get this at 80. If you can get in the bundle, awesome. If you can find like a used copy in a couple years that's like 40 or 50, that's also really good. But I would not pay more than 70 for this. Notes, this is pretty important for games captured on Switch 2. The recording options are not good and are the same as Switch 1, meaning this game does run at 60 FPS, but the recording is going to be at 30. I'm going to try to interpolate it and kind of show 60 FPS if I can. Most of the time, however, that's not an option because of how the Switch's built-in recording system works. The second problem, HDR is enabled in this game, and no format likes HDR for whatever reason and doesn't capture it well, so I'm going to try my best to edit the colors to make it not awful, and hopefully I can do that through some kind of conversion or something. So if it looks a little weird, this game does look very good in HDR, so I would say that. But this does run at 1080, 60 consistently, as well as have really great colors. And the video might not do it justice because HDR gets kind of wonky, and it's probably capturing at 30 FPS. So just note that for the gameplay here. The game loop of Mario Kart World is pretty simple. However, it is a little bit different than other racing games. So obviously, as we mentioned, it has that ability to go from one course to the other, and that does change the dynamic of the loop. So instead of it actually just being a loop and then you go to the next one, you end one race after you get to it, and then you race to the next one as basically a connecting track, and that effectively changes how you end up ending off a circuit run, right? So instead of it just being 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, it's 1 to the connecting track, you end off a loop, and then to the connecting track, you end off a loop. And what I mean by that is, in this mode, there are not 3-lap races for each course. There are 3 laps for the first one, and then you'll do a connecting for 2 and do 1 lap at the end there, and do a connecting 2 and 1 lap at the end, and that's how that's kind of set up. So you do still get to see a full loop of the courses, but you don't get 3 loops when you do this option. In online play, this is a little bit different because you go into it and you can select a random course or a course that's not connected, and then inherently you're not going to get that connected race, so it will give you that 3 laps, but that is obviously mostly dependent on what the other players pick because it is a picked option, right? Like it's a random wheel basically. So if it picks a connected one, you'll be doing a connected race, and if it doesn't, you'll just go back to the old method. I do want to make that clear. So while there is a standard 3 loop for each course, like before, if you get one that's connected, that is not the case. How to play the game, pretty simple. There are systems that are in place are the same ones that were in 8 Deluxe. You have smart steering, which will prevent you from going over holes and things, but also prevent you from taking shortcuts a lot of the time. You have auto acceleration, you have auto use items, those kind of things. You have tilt controls that you can use, but otherwise you are just drifting with the button, with the right shoulder button. You're drifting with that, you're accelerating with A, you're braking with B, you're using items with the left bumper, right, all those things. So the difference in terms of the tricks you can do is you can hold down right bumper while you're going forward, and you'll do a little jump that you release. And you can do that jump and then flick the left stick either direction to flip over to like a rail grind, for instance, and then you could do it again to go to like a wall, and then you could, so you're kind of like bouncing between them. And so that's the only real change in terms of controls, is that you can hold down the drift button to like do a little jump, and then use that jump to go to different places there. That's pretty normal. The other thing in terms of how to play the game is the items you collect as you go through the boxes now auto trail behind you instead of you having to press a button to do that, which does at least protect you somewhat from a lot of these shells or other things that were maybe annoying. You kind of have some protection because immediately when you get an item, it will go behind you without having to hold a button. But other than that, all the, as I said before, the accessibility things are still the same. You can still do tilt controls, you can still do auto accelerate, auto items, that kind of thing, but you can obviously turn those off as well. So the game is pretty simple in terms of how it's played. Pros and cons. I would say absolutely the pros, and here's where we get into some of the cooler things. It's very expressive. This game is extremely expressive, way more than other kart racers or racers in general can be. Every single kart feels like it's alive. Every single racer is way more animated than before. The sparks flying, all the visual effects and stuff, like every single option for the game to be expressive in terms of its karts and characters and world, it is. It really does feel energetic and alive and crazy and exactly what you're looking for. Next to that is the quality of the effects work in this game. And that's something not a lot of people notice. You get on Rainbow Road and it looks like a rainbow. You get and see all these visual effects and all these people and all these items and stuff, and it stays clear, which is an incredibly impressive feat, especially considering there's 24 racers and they're all going crazy. The fact that you can see everything that's happening, that everything stays with it being so expressive, is absolutely a testament to how well the game is designed, especially compared to other games on the Switch like Crash Team Racing, where that isn't the case, where because of the way that game renders and how it renders and stuff, it can get a little bit weird and noisy. It never gets noisy in this game, so that is a very, very impressive and very good. The other things on top of just it being an expressive game with expressive karts and the quality of the effects is the knockout mode is a really big standout. That kind of battle royale and last man standing mode is a very big standout for the game and absolutely a pro. It's very fun and it absolutely deserves to be like the star mode here. Because you just sprint directly through 1 to 6 courses. You're just going through it, no stopping, no nothing, and it gets, harder and harder as you go higher and higher. And then I'd say the fourth thing is just the costumes. You don't have to pay for costumes or DLC or anything. There's a bunch of costumes for a bunch of characters that you can unlock, and that is pretty good. There's a couple cons. I would say there's 3 main cons to this game. One, free roam mode, as everyone has said, is not that interesting in terms of you just kind of like going around in the world collecting switches and stuff. It's not that interesting and not that good in terms of like a free roam mode and what it can be. Second thing is the fact that it is 24 racers does become a little bit annoying in terms of if you're trying to actually play the game and you constantly get hit by lightning and shells and other items, so it's a little bit too chaotic at times, especially in online where some of the netcode might not be as good. So that 24 racers is definitely a double-edged sword when it comes to that. And the reason I mention that is because I don't believe there's a way to limit the room that you make in online to like 12 players. So you're most likely going to have 24 players unless you set it to like invite only, right? But there's no real way to say, hey, I want to do a 12-person race. At least currently, it's 24 players. I'll try and update if that ever changes. But like if you're getting into a race of a public lobby, it's going to be 24 players, and that could be a little bit chaotic. And obviously the third thing is pricing, and that is more so just the fact of like the $80 price would be a problem, but it would be a little bit easier to digest if you could also play it on the Switch 1. And if it was like a cross-gen thing, that would be like, okay, we're really expensive, but you can at least play without having to buy a new system. But because you have to both buy a new system and buy this game for $80, especially once the bundle goes away, that is quite hard to swallow. And that will affect kind of the recommendation to a lot of people, because Nintendo games aren't the ones to just, in a couple years it'll be like 30. It's like, no, it's not going to be 30 in a couple years. It's going to be 80 in a couple years, right? So that does go into affecting, the quality of the recommendation. It's like, yes, this game absolutely is worth it if you were trying to do something that is a long-term 10-year, 8-year game with multiplayer aspects and all the Switch 2 aspects and stuff. But for a lot of people, it's not worth that amount of money. So wrapping it up here for platform issues, I didn't have any issues. It ran perfectly fine. Again, the footage you're seeing here is probably going to be at 30 FPS and some weird colors. because of how the capturing works, but the game itself runs very good and knows any performance issues, any technical issues, any platform issues, outside of some weird requirements for HDR. This is more to do with TVs. I was trying to set this up on my Samsung 65-inch QLED TV. I'm not quite sure the model number. And Samsung's god-awful implementation of whatever this HDR stuff is would constantly lose the HDMI signal. So this is more so like a platform issue if you're connecting to a TV. I noticed when I was trying to set it up, like you should check HD Test TV's video, the most recent one on this. And for Samsung TVs, I followed every step. It was doing this. And one thing to note is it will show HDR being off, but it's actually enabled, because when you go into an HDR thing, it will pop up and be actually HDR. So that's like a weird technicality where like 8 times out of 10 when I did this, it wouldn't show up HDR in the menu, it would just not work. Sometimes it would, and you'd notice because the screen would go from really bright to really dark. And that's actually like not a problem, because the Samsung TV like has a weird thing where it'll fix itself once you get into a game. So if you watch that video and are confused and like, why isn't it working on my TV? And it's a Samsung TV, it's because not only do you need input plus on under external under connections, external device manager, whatever, HDMI 1 has to be on for that. You need to go into game mode, turn game mode to on, and then make sure that HDR game, whatever, is set to basic, and then make sure under picture, advanced picture, your sharpness is 0, your HDR tone mapping is static, your contrast enhancer is off, and that should work. You go into Mario Kart and it's like, haha, here we are, it's HDR. So that's just a kind of quick thing there for Samsung. If you're trying to figure out why it's not working, adjust those settings on Samsung and the HDR should work correctly. So for conclusion, I do recommend the game. I think it's a pretty great game. However, for people that are maybe a lot into something like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, or that don't want to spend the money on both a Switch 2 and the game, I can definitely see it being a hard recommendation for those people. But as someone that hadn't played a ton of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and has a Switch 2, I think it's a pretty big no-brainer in terms of just the quality of the races you're getting and the fantastic course design and the just quality of the characters and expression there. It really is a worthwhile experience if you're up for it. So if you enjoyed this stuff and want to see more of this kind of thing on the channel, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, do all that, and I'll see everyone in the next video.